The sun bled itself thin across the horizon, spilling fire into the dust that hung over the small town. Shadows stretched long, and the creak of a saloon sign in the wind was the only sound that dared to break the hush. Then came the riders, 5 of them, moving in slow formation as though even their horses carried the weight of ghosts. Dust rose behind them like a shroud, marking their arrival not as travelers, but as fate itself. The townsfolk had already felt it coming. A hush lingered in the air long before the first hoof struck dirt. Mothers herded their children behind doors, their whispers cut short by the closing of shutters. Men tried at nonchalance, leaning against posts with hands too near their gun belts. But the tremor in their breath betrayed them. Everyone knew the names of the wild bunch, though none spoke them aloud as the gang dismounted and tied their horses to the rail. The leader moved first. He carried silence with him the way others carried weapons. And when his boots found the saloon porch, the wood seemed to bend under the burden of his presence. His face was carved into hard lines, eyes empty as a canyon at midnight. Years of blood had written themselves into him, and yet he bore no flourish, only inevitability. Behind him, the others fell into their places. The scarred veteran whose left hand shook until it found steel. The lank figure with eyes like hungry coals. The youngest whose jaw clenched to hide a fear he could never master. And the weary drifter whose grin seemed painted on with a knife's edge. Inside, silence thickened. The piano's player froze mid-chord, the unfinished note hanging sharp in the smoky air. The wild bunch passed through the room as though they already owned it, their spurs dragging sparks from the floorboards. At the bar, the barkeep's hand trembled so violently his glass slopped whiskey onto the counter. But no one dared laugh. The conflict was not spoken, but it burned in every glance. They had not come for drink, nor for company, nor for fleeting refuge. Word had spread fast enough. Lawmen, bounty hunters, and desperate men alike had gathered on the edges of town, waiting for the chance to end them and claim a reward written in blood and coin. The wild bunch knew this. They had ridden into the lion's den not with hope of victory, but because there was nowhere else left to go. The youngest outlaw met the leader's eye, and in the stillness of that glance was a confession, fear, loyalty, the unspoken question of whether they would die here tonight. The leader gave no answer. He only settled into a chair at the corner table, his revolvers heavy on his hips, his silence louder than any sermon, and so the room exhaled, trembling with the knowledge that death had taken its seat, and the night had only just begun. The saloon's lamps flickered low, smoke twisting in the air like restless spirits. Rain threatened outside, thunder grumbling across the plains, but within those four walls, the true storm brewed quieter, heavier. The wild bunch sat in the dim light, each man wrestling with ghosts only he could see. The weight of years pressed down upon them, turning silence into confession. The scarred veteran nursed a glass, the whiskey untouched. His eyes were far away, locked on a memory he could not shake. Once, long ago, he had been a soldier for a cause he no longer remembered. His hands already red before he ever joined an outlaw's saddle. He recalled a woman's voice, soft as prayer, begging him to put down the gun and take up a life worth keeping. He had ignored her, He had watched her die in a town not so different from this one, blood blooming across her dress like roses in the dirt. Every job since then had been penance, every bullet another nail in his own coffin. He said nothing of this, but his silence told its own tale. Across from him, the lank figure with cold dark eyes leaned back, grinning in a way that never reached his gaze. He had been born to violence, raised in dust and hunger, where the only law was survival. For him, killing was not a burden but a trade. Each body left in his wake no different from a coin in the palm. Yet even he felt the pull of the walls tightening, the trap closing. For all his bravado, there lingered in his expression the smallest shadow of doubt, a hesitation that had never haunted him before. The youngest shifted uneasily on his chair, fingers tracing the worn handle of his revolver. He remembered his first kill, the way the gun had bucked in his hand, and the man had dropped in the dirt. With eyes wide in disbelief, that sound, the hollow thud of a body meeting earth, had never left him. Now, staring at the warped floorboards, he wondered if tonight he would fall the same way, or worse. If he would live long enough to see his friends cut down around him. Fear clung to him, but so did loyalty. He would not abandon the only family he had ever known, even if it meant dying before his beard had fully grown. The weary drifter twirled a coin between his fingers, grinning like a man playing cards with the devil himself. He thrived on chaos, yet even he could not ignore the whispers outside. Through the window came faint shapes of men positioning themselves, rifles angled, waiting for the first spark. He flicked the coin high, caught it, and let it rest in his palm. For once, he said nothing. At the corner, the leader sat still as stone, eyes fixed on nothing and everything. The others stole glances, searching for a sign, a word, a gesture. None came. Yet in his silence they found the truth. They were already dead men, only waiting for the hour to arrive. Then the thunder cracked sharp, closer than before, and every man lifted his head. The storm had found them, and it would not wait long. The first raindrops tapped against the window glass, each one a hollow drumbeat that seemed to quicken the heart of the town. The wild bunch rose almost in unison, as though some unspoken summons had stirred them. Boots ground against the saloon's floor, spurs jangling like distant chains. The sound sharp and final. Their chairs remained behind, empty specters of men who had already stepped beyond the reach of ordinary fate. The scarred veteran adjusted his coat and flexed his left hand, the tremor steadying only when his palm brushed the grip of his revolver. He moved slower than the others, burdened by age and regret. But the resolve in his step carried more weight than youth could match. He was a man who had already died once in his heart and carried the ashes forward as armor. The lank figure with coal-black eyes swaggered toward the door, shoulders loose, grin curling despite the tension that gripped the room. He thrived in moments like these, when life and death narrowed to a razor's edge. Yet his laughter did not come. Behind the sharp glimmer in his eyes lay the truth he would never confess. This night frightened him. The streets were filled with men who had studied his every move, learned his reputation, and meant to erase it with bullets. The youngest followed, his steps quick, almost hurried, as if moving too slowly might betray his fear. His revolver sat heavy on his hip, and he touched it like a talisman. The thought of running flickered in his mind, but so did the image of leaving these men to fall without him. Loyalty bound him tighter than fear could break, and so he swallowed hard and pressed forward. His face pale in the lamplight, the weary drifter flipped his coin one last time, catching it with a grin carved more from habit than joy. He tucked it into his pocket and swung the saloon doors open. The storm rushed in cold air, wet earth, and the smell of lightning. He breathed it deep, as though this night were nothing more than a game he had wagered on and meant to win. Though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, the leader brought up the rear. He spoke no word, gave no order, yet his presence steadied the line. He stepped into the rain as if it were merely another battlefield, his silence a shield as strong as steel. Outside, the street lay hushed, lanterns guttering in the wind. Shutters cracked open, revealing pale faces hungry for history. Farther down, the rifles of bounty hunters and lawmen gleamed faintly, their shadows shifting behind barrels and broken wagons. Every breath in town seemed to pause. The wild bunch climbed the porch one step at a time, rain running off their hats, wood groaning beneath their boots. Lightning split the sky, casting them in stark silhouette. For an instant, the world held its breath. Then a single creak of timber echoed loud as a gunshot, and the night braced itself for what must come next. The silence shattered with a rifle's crack, a single shot that split the storm and sent splinters leaping from the porch rail. In an instant, the street erupted. Muzzles flared in the dark, thunder answering thunder, the smell of powder flooding the air. The wild bunch moved as one, each man claiming his place in the storm of lead that sought to swallow them whole. The scarred veteran fired steady, his hand sure despite its tremor, each bullet measured, deliberate. He dropped one rifleman from the shadows, then another, his eyes cold and unblinking. A shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him back against a post. Blood ran down his sleeve, but he held the wood for balance, teeth clenched, refusing to fall before his work was done. The lank figure with the hungry eyes let out a bark of laughter as he returned fire. Reckless, fearless, a demon in the lightning's glow. He cut down a man crouched behind a wagon, then another, until the roar of his pistol clicked empty. Even as bullets tore through him, he staggered forward, his grin widening, as though defying death was victory enough. When he finally fell, it was with smoke still curling from his revolver. The youngest fought like a cornered animal, face pale, eyes wild. His hands shook, but his shots found flesh. Each trigger pull a desperate refusal to vanish from the world unnamed. He broke from cover, perhaps chasing glory, perhaps fleeing fear, and charged into the rain-slick street. For a heartbeat, he looked unstoppable. Then the storm cut him down, his body tumbling into the mud with a cry that was swallowed by thunder. The weary drifter danced along the edge of the porch, firing quick, clever, every move a gambler's trick. He used shadow and smoke as allies, striking where the hunters least expected. A bullet grazed his temple, and blood blinded one eye. Yet he fought on, coin still heavy in his pocket, as if mocking the odds he had wagered against. At last, a rifle blast hurled him back against the wall. his grin fading as he slid down the boards, leaving a dark streak behind. Only the leader remained upright, revolvers glowing hot in his hands, eyes burning with something beyond fury, a calm defiance that no bullet could erase. He stepped forward into the open, rain streaming down his face, each step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. He fired left, then right, and men fell screaming into the dirt. But the circle around him tightened, muzzles converging like vultures on carrion. The final volley tore into him, a storm within a storm. His body shuddered, yet he would not kneel. He gripped the porch rail with one bloody hand, lifted his head to the blackened sky, and laughed a hoarse, ragged sound that cut through the chaos and froze every witness. Then he let go, collapsing forward onto the blood-slick boards, his fall sealing the night. The guns fell silent. Smoke drifted with the rain, heavy and metallic. Townsfolk emerged, faces pale, eyes wide with awe and dread. A boy whispered, "They died standing," and the words spread through the hush like scripture. The porch, stained deep with blood, would not forget. Above it all, the storm began to clear, stars piercing through the black. The boards gleamed red beneath their light, a monument not carved by stone, but by sacrifice. And in that stillness, the wild bunch passed into legend.